My ex keeps pulling me back, and I'm supposed to be getting married. I was standing in a bridal shop dressing room 3 days before my final dress fitting when my phone lit up with a name I had deleted from my contacts 4 separate times and somehow always managed to save again. Daniel. Just his name, no message, sitting there on the screen like a stone dropped into still water. I want you to understand something before I go any further into this because it matters for everything that comes after. I am not a woman who cheats, who lies, who keeps secrets folded into the corners of her life like spare change. I have spent the last year building something with a man named Theo who deserves every ounce of loyalty I have ever claimed to have. And yet there I was, half in a wedding dress that cost more than my first car, staring at a notification like it was a lit match dropped near dry grass. Daniel and I dated for 3 years in our early 20s, the kind of relationship that felt less like a choice and more like weather, something that happened to me rather than something I built. He was magnetic in the way certain unstable things are magnetic, brilliant and unpredictable and always slightly out of reach, which I mistook for depth at the time instead of recognizing it for what it actually was, which was inconsistency dressed up in a leather jacket. We broke up the way those relationships always seem to break up, not with a clean cut but with a slow bleed, 6 months of on again off again that left both of us raw and neither of us honest. When it finally ended for good, I told myself it was for good. I believed it. I moved cities, I changed my number. I did the things people do when they are trying to outrun a version of themselves they are ashamed of. Theo came into my life 2 years after that, quietly, the way good things tend to arrive when you have stopped performing for an audience. He noticed things about me that Daniel never had the patience to notice, the way I go quiet when I'm overwhelmed instead of loud, the way I need 45 minutes alone after a long day before I can be good company to anyone, including myself. He proposed on a Tuesday, which I loved, because Tuesdays are nothing, Tuesdays are ordinary, and he wanted to make an ordinary day extraordinary instead of outsourcing the romance to a date that already meant something. I said yes without a flicker of hesitation. I want that on the record because what happened next will make you doubt it, and I need you to hold on to that truth the way I have had to hold on to it myself on the nights when doubt tried to rewrite my own memory. The first message from Daniel came 4 months after the engagement. It was nothing on the surface, just a photo of a coffee shop we used to go to captioned "This place is closing down, thought you want to know." I didn't respond. I told myself that not responding was the mature thing, the boundaried thing, and I felt proud of myself in a small, quiet way, like I had passed a test I hadn't realized I was taking. But here is the part I did not tell Theo, the part that sits in my chest like a stone I swallowed and can't cough back up. I looked at that message 11 times over the next 3 days. I did not respond to Daniel, but I did not stop looking, and there is a difference between restraint and indifference that I was only beginning to understand. The messages kept coming after that, spaced out just enough to seem accidental, never enough to seem like a pattern until you stepped back and looked at the whole shape of it, the way you only notice a spiderweb once you're already standing in the middle of it. A song that reminded him of me, a meme he thought I'd find funny. A drunk text at 1 in the morning that just said, "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" And then 20 minutes later, "Ignore that, I'm just in my feelings tonight." I did not ignore it. I read it standing in my dark kitchen with Theo asleep upstairs, and I felt something in my body that I had spent 2 years convincing myself was dead, and the fact that it was not dead terrified me more than anything Daniel could have said outright. I need to be honest about the shape of what I was feeling because I think this is where a lot of people would either lie to themselves or lie to you, and I refuse to do either. It was not that I wanted Daniel back. I did not lie awake dreaming of some alternate life where I had chosen him instead of Theo. What I wanted, I think, what I was actually responding to was the specific kind of attention Daniel gives, the intensity of being chosen by someone chaotic, the adrenaline of being wanted by someone who makes wanting you feel like a competition he might lose. Theo's love is steady, and steady love, I am ashamed to admit, can sometimes feel to a wounded part of you like the absence of love, because you have trained your nervous system on chaos and now you don't know how to read peace as anything other than boredom. That is not a flattering thing to realize about yourself 3 months before your wedding. But it is true, and I would rather tell you the true ugly version of this than a clean one that makes me look like a victim of nothing but bad timing. The turning point, the moment I actually have to sit with shame about, happened on a Thursday when Theo was away for a work conference and Daniel showed up, unannounced, outside the restaurant where I was having dinner with my sister. Not inside. Outside on the sidewalk like he had planned the whole entrance, which knowing him he probably had. My sister saw him before I did and grabbed my arm so hard it left a mark, because she knew exactly who he was and exactly what his showing up meant, having watched me survive him once already. I walked outside. I want to be clear that nobody forced me to walk outside, that this was a choice I made with my full, sober, functioning mind, and I have replayed that decision more times than I can count trying to understand why I made it. We talked for 20 minutes on that sidewalk. He told me he had never stopped loving me, that he had grown up, that the version of him who couldn't commit had died somewhere in the last 4 years and been replaced by someone who finally understood what he'd thrown away. I believed maybe 60% of it. And even that 60% felt like enough to crack something open in my chest that I thought had scarred over completely. I did not kiss him. I did not go anywhere with him. But I stood there and I let him hold my hand for what was probably 10 seconds and felt like an hour. And when I walked back inside, my sister looked at me with an expression I will never forget, not anger, which I could have handled, but grief, like she was watching me hand something valuable to someone who had already proven he couldn't be trusted with it. She didn't say a word about it that night. She waited until we were in the car, and then she asked me one question that I think saved my life, or at least saved my marriage before it had even begun. She asked, if Theo could see what just happened on that sidewalk, would you still feel okay about it? And I sat with that question in silence for the entire drive home, because I already knew the answer, and the answer was no. And a woman who is at peace with her choices does not need to hide them from the person she claims to love most. I told Theo everything 2 days later. Not because I was caught, not because Daniel threatened to tell him, which he never did and never would have, but because I finally understood that the secret itself was the betrayal, more than the hand-holding, more than the messages I hadn't deleted, more than the 60% of me that still lit up at the sound of Daniel's name. Keeping it hidden meant I was building our marriage on a foundation with a hole in it, and I have watched enough people I love construct entire lives on top of unspoken things to know exactly how that story ends, slowly, quietly, and then all at once, usually around year 7 when the resentment finally breaks the surface. Theo did not yell. I almost wish he had, because his silence was so much worse. A long, controlled quiet that told me he was doing the work of deciding whether I was still the person he thought he was marrying. What followed was the hardest month of my adult life, harder than the actual breakup with Daniel had ever been, because this time the stakes were a future I actually wanted instead of one I was trying to escape. Theo asked me calmly and without cruelty whether I wanted to marry him or whether I wanted the feeling Daniel gave me. And he told me gently but without any room for negotiation that he could not build a life with someone who was still keeping one foot out the door for an emergency exit labeled with someone else's name. He did not ask me to block Daniel as some kind of loyalty test or performance for his benefit. He asked me to sit with myself and figure out, honestly, which version of love I actually wanted to spend my life inside of, the one that felt like a drug or the one that felt like a home. I spent 3 weeks in something close to a fog, journaling more in that month than I had in the previous 5 years combined, trying to separate nostalgia from desire, trying to understand whether I missed Daniel or whether I simply missed being 23 and unafraid of consequences. The answer, when it finally came, was quieter than I expected, and less dramatic than the question itself had felt. I did not miss Daniel. I missed a feeling that Daniel happened to be attached to in my memory, the feeling of being wanted so intensely that it drowned out every quieter, more uncomfortable feeling underneath it, including the ones I didn't want to feel, like the loneliness of being with someone who could never be emotionally present for longer than a few electric weeks at a time. Theo's love had never once made my nervous system light up the way Daniel's chaos did, and for a long time I had mistaken that absence of chaos for an absence of passion, when really it was the presence of something I had never learned how to recognize because nobody in my life had ever modeled it for me. Safety that doesn't get boring, intensity that comes from depth instead of instability. I blocked Daniel's number myself without being asked on a Tuesday, the same day of the week Theo had proposed to me, and I remember thinking that felt like the right kind of symmetry, closing one door on the exact day another had opened. I wish I could tell you Theo forgave me instantly and we moved forward without a scar, but that would be a lie, and I have already told you I'm done lying in this story. It took months of conversations, some of them at 2 in the morning, some of them in a therapist's office we started seeing together, before the trust between us stopped feeling like something we were rebuilding and started feeling like something that simply existed again, unremarkable and solid, the way it used to before Daniel's shadow fell across it. Theo asked me hard questions during that time, questions like whether I could promise him this wouldn't happen again if Daniel resurfaced in 5 years or 10, and I told him the only honest thing I could tell him, which is that I couldn't promise the temptation would never appear again because temptation isn't something you can permanently kill, but I could promise him that the next time it showed up, he would be the first person I told, not the last. We got married in the spring, 8 months later than we'd originally planned, because we both agreed we needed the extra time to make sure we were walking into this with our eyes fully open instead of just relieved to have survived a crisis. Standing at the altar, I thought about that sidewalk more than I thought I would, not with longing, but with something closer to gratitude, strange as that sounds, because that ugly, humiliating moment was what finally forced me to stop coasting on the assumption that loving someone and choosing someone are the same thing. They are not. Loving someone is a feeling that can ambush you on a sidewalk outside a restaurant with no warning at all. Choosing someone is a decision you have to keep making, deliberately, especially on the days when an old, familiar chaos is standing right in front of you offering you an easier, more electric version of a life you've already outgrown. If there is a lesson buried in all of this, and I have turned it over enough times in my head to believe there is one, it's that the danger was never really Daniel. Daniel was just a symptom, a familiar ghost wearing the shape of an old wound that I had never actually finished healing before I let myself get engaged. The real danger was my own unexamined belief that steady love had to feel boring in order to be real, that if my heart wasn't racing, it must mean something was missing, when in fact the opposite was true. The racing heart was the thing that had been missing something all along. Safety, honesty, a person who wouldn't disappear the moment things got difficult. Theo never asked me to be a perfect woman who never felt a flicker of something for someone else. He asked me to be an honest one. And it turns out honesty, not the absence of temptation, is what actually built the marriage that chaos could never have given me. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and comment for more crazy confessions I get from people.